Amala Harina Mamiya Vilasa Amala Harina Mamiya Vilasa Vipina Purandara Nagina Nagarama Shivadana Suvasa Rajajana Bhavana Surmula Nashana Rajajana Bhavana Surmula
I thought I'd just ask for questions tonight. Yes.
When we talk about the progression of bhakti, it sounds like we're talking about a progression in time. In due course, it will become purified. Bhakti, the ingression of bhakti will happen. And obviously, bhakti is not within the jurisdiction of time, so it's not something that is being dictated by a certain amount of time and then you're going to achieve a goal. But in this world, when we think of it, we're thinking maturing happens in a time. So what is going on with bhakti that requires some maturation, but it's not having to do with time. It has to do with something else she's doing for us or to us. What is? Do you understand where I'm?
Yeah, I think I understand your questioning. So I'll comment to some extent. You seem to be talking about the fact that time is the factor in this world, or so it appears, and bhakti is transcendental to time; it's eternal. It said, for example, in Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's verse, Bengali verse, in which he is reiterating Rupa Goswami's definition of sadhana, bhakti, defined in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Krishna Prem Nityasira Sadhuka Munaya Shravanadi Sudhachite Kore Uday. Krishna Prem is eternally existing, Sadhuka Munaya. It's not something that's accomplished, that didn't exist, but exists in time, after time, or in some time, like material things. They come into existence for time, and then over time, within time, and then they disappear. So it's not like that, this Krishna Prem. And Shravanadi Sudhachite, by hearing and chanting, etc., the consciousness, chitta, becomes Shuddha, and Kare Uday, this Prem that's eternally existing, arises or manifests in the purified heart, consciousness, Atma, the self. So I'll try to address your concerns through this verse. It has many far-reaching implications, but just with regard to the eternality of bhakti and its eternal perfection its being beyond time, and the fact that it manifests within us under a certain conditions. And the conditions described here is Suddha Chitte, when the consciousness, heart, Chitta becomes pure, means cleansed. Mahaprabhu has described that there are sevenfold effects, sevenfold effect of Nam Sankirtan, the first of which is Chaita Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the Chitta, the consciousness. It doesn't mean cleansing the Atma, which can never be dirty, but the medium through which self kind of, the subtle body, this is what's meant by the Chitta. And then there's a kind of knowing that results from that. And so it says, in this condition, then this bhakti, known as prema, which is eternally existing, manifests. So it's all happening within the world that is under the jurisdiction of time, but bhakti is transcendental to time. And in sadhana bhakti, then Rupa Goswami's verse, that, as I say, Krishnadas is paraphrasing, says as well that the goal of the sadhana bhakti is to attain bhava bhakti, and that means that the goal of bhakti is bhakti. So as we do more bhakti, we get more bhakti. So bhaktiya sanjataya bhaktiya. Bhakti is independent, and so bhakti begets bhakti. And that has no end. That may have a beginning in our lives, but it has no end. There's no end at which time bhakti stops begetting bhakti. That's why praying has also been described as being full but ever increasing. And these things, of course, are contradictory within the realm of our present experience, but fortunately, that's not, that's a limited realm of experience, beyond which transcendence resolves these apparent contradictions. There are things that don't work in our minds, and that's the limitations of our rational faculty, capacity to discriminate. So if we want a whole world in our head, but it doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit in our head. And that's a very reasonable position to take. It takes a very fat head to think that you're going to fit the whole world inside of it. And so the transcendentalists, they are a small group of people who are of the conviction that there are ways of knowing that transcend the limits of our rational faculty. And I've given an example before that the DNA of the chimpanzee is almost exactly the same as the DNA of a human. The difference is infinitesimal, but the result is considerable, we assume, in terms of our capacity to know and fit the world within our head, if you will, and that of the chimpanzee's capacity. So there's every reason to believe that there could be, just from a biological point of view, beings whose DNA is a little different than ours, and more things, other dimensions, for example, can fit within just a way of thinking about devas and so forth. And what speak that beyond that, as we Prabhupada used to like to say there's a land in which the word impossible is not found in the dictionary. And that's good to know. So there, prem is full, but it's always increasing. So that's its nature. Love just feeds on itself and grows. So now you don't have any time beyond time, but there, in limited way, in the way in which it limits here, time here in this realm limits and teaches as to the limits of the realm. Time is also manifest in the spiritual world, but for the sake of sequence of events. Even though each event and each moment, each second of each event is eternal. The example, of course, is given of the sun in that it's always 12 o'clock somewhere. It's always 12:01, 12:02 somewhere. But from your vantage point, it only lasts for 30 seconds, even less than that, right? As soon as it's 12, it's 12:01 point, whatever, 1 second after. So it appears to be limited or whatever, but it's eternally always existing somewhere, something like that. It's a nice example, I think, to help us appreciate the nature of the realm of Leela, praying, Nitya Krishna praying. So it's eternally perfect and it's full and ever expanding at the same time. And this is beyond time. How is it always expanding without time? If it's one day was less and the next day it's expanding more, but these are not, this is trying to fit our range of experience in that realm, about which we can say only so much because it transcends language as well as logic. That which is said about it by reliable people is very useful, very helpful. We should attach ourselves to those descriptions because they're empowered. They're attempts by persons who have the experience to put the experience into words and thought and reason and so forth, as limited as those mediums are for expressing it. But those become very spiritually charged explanations, analogies, words, language, and so on and so forth. I just say that as an aside almost because sometimes people say, well, Krishna, God consciousness must transcend culture and language and so on and so forth. That doesn't mean that some cultures and some language and some reasoning and spoken, invoked on the part of persons who have standing in that realm is something to dismiss. No, it's very, very helpful for us in this realm to take advantage of. So in this world, then, we are under the influence of time. Bhakti comes into our life, and I would just soon look at it like I'm saying that it comes into our life and it's culture. It is anushilana. That means it's an ongoing culture that has no end. But Sridhar Maharaj used to say we are all students in this school forever. So there's a sense in monistic Vedanta that we should start being and stop trying to become, because you already are more than what you're trying to become. We're trying to become happy. We're trying to become secure. We're trying to be, period. But you are, the answer is Satchit Ananda. So stop trying to become and just be. But within Bhakti, there is being and becoming at the same time. So it's a transcendental becoming, because Bhakti is outside of the Atma. It's the internal Shakti of Krishna can make its ingress into the life of the fortunate jiva, and then it can become, if you will, all that it has the potential to become. As I often say, it has a nature that lends itself to nurture. It's nurtured by bhakti. Then it can become all that it can be. So that's a different idea. Of course, we agree that otherwise we're trying to become constantly all that which we are in terms of our material pursuits. But there is some becoming with regard to bhakti. It's outside of the self in a sense, but in another sense, it's more of what the self is about. Most of the self is about eternality, and it's a unit of knowing. I mean, that means it has the power to know, to apprehend, and to experience. So, bhakti is an experience. We have the power to experience, so we can have the experience of bhakti. Krishna is something to be known. So we have the power to know, and then what is his nature to solve someone again? So at any rate, bhakti, sadhana bhakti, cleanses the heart. When the heart is cleansed, then there's a suitable place for another aspect of bhakti to manifest fully. So the kind of active aspect of anushilanam, in terms of bhakti playing herself out on our senses, hearing, chanting, serving in the temple, and so on and so forth. Sadhana bhakti is characterized by the senses being employed in bhakti. Bhakti descends, the opportunity comes, and our senses become engaged in bhakti, and we're kind of like bhakti sadhakas or interns or something like that, apprentices, and some emotional, the emotional content of bhakti may present itself in an abhas, or more likely, we take our emotions and try to invest our emotional sensibilities in bhakti, kind of metaphorically, we give our heart, we try to, and so forth. As I say, that eternal praying, then it manifests, I guess you could say, in ways that are appropriate to the circumstance. So it will appear to an impure heart in a way that will purify the heart. When the heart becomes purified, chitta becomes purified, it becomes a suitable place for the emotional aspect of bhakti to manifest bhava. And then the praying is really just a churning of the bhava. So, and that goes on and on and on. You can call it praying, then you call it sneha, man, pranay, rag, bhav, this kind of mahabhav, that kind of mahabhav, and it's almost like we'll stop there for now. But, so it's beyond time. We're within time, and on its own time, which means it's beyond time. It manifests appropriately according to the circumstances. Verse is an important verse that is often thought to say probably since the time of Bhakti Vinod. Bhakti Vinod was an innovator, as we know, and he took some license to present the teachings in certain ways in light of the time he was in, and the task that he saw before him to interface with the Western world, on the one hand, and to bring dignity to the Gaudiya tradition, on the other hand, which in his estimation was lacking. He himself admitted to have grown up thinking that the Gaudiya people were not real sadhus, and the Bhagavatam was where the sacred texts of the Hindus went south. Because in the Bhagavatam, the god becomes an adulterer, it would seem, on its face, on the surface, and that's how it was being read by the Europeans who were dominating India at the time. But of course, when he came in touch with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's response to the Bhagavatam and understanding of the Bhagavatam, seeing the moral character of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which was impeccable, and that this moral character was a byproduct of his absorption in the transcendental adultery of Krishna. He thought this must be transcendental. It's different, and so obviously the underlying canvas of philosophy and theology that puts the Krishna's Rasa Leela in a spiritual light. He imbibed that, relished that, and to the surprise of many of the people in the think tank of educated Hindus at the time in Calcutta, which was the headquarters of the British as well, he didn't join any other group, but he joined the Gaudiya group. Which was, why would he was an educated and pious man. Why would he do that? So he had the two sides. One side is to interface with the West and present it in consideration of perhaps obviously ways in which they were thinking about things and so forth. And also then with regard to how it was being misrepresented and his estimation, and there's some history to that to document that his perception of the tradition was accurate in terms of how it was perceived by the Hindu public. Speak of the European public, if a Gaudiya person came to the door and a pious Hindu, so give him some rights and send him away. Nothing to learn from those people. So, and one of the things that apparently was prominent was the idea that certain persons could trace their family lineage to some of the eternal associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like Advaita, Nityananda, the Vamsas, the families, the lineages. And on the basis of that seminal lineage, if you will, they claimed spiritual standing on that alone. And there are some statements to the effect of that for this many generations, the followers of this person will be, liberated or whatnot. So they took maybe some miles out of those statements, and obviously it is not the teaching that by birth in a family connected to one of the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you become an associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu necessarily. Indeed, we find the case in with regard to Advaitacharya that some of his sons were rejected by him. They were just as much his sons as the others, but they didn't embraced properly, in his estimation, the teachings that Krishna, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the source of Advaita, the venerable object of Advaita. This was their deviation. They wanted Advaita to be, and so Advaita rejected them. That was their Maya. It's subtle. But at any rate, at the time of Bhakti Vinod, one of the ways in which this became a little unbecoming was that persons in one of these lineages who was less than qualified didn't understand the philosophy in depth as a teacher, as a guru must to teach, claimed spiritual seniority position and so forth, and then used that to abuse persons and exploit them really and make a living off of them. I mean, there are statements we hear were made like, if I tell you to drink my urine, I come from Nityananda's family. If I tell you to drink my urine, that would be good for you. And the general people are gullible and so on, and so they conducted themselves in ways that sadhus like Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took exception to. And so this plays out in terms of the verse and how Bhaktivinoda and the successors of Bhaktivinoda seem to talk about it in that some of these so-called acharyas and so forth, they would say, if you don't come to me, you cannot get your swarup. So I will give you the swarup. And after all, the swarup comes from the Guru, from sadhu sangha, bhakti. But how it does that, of course, that's an important point. By karanam guna sangasya sarasati, it's no different spiritually. This is a statement from the Gita. As you associate, so you become. So we are of a nature that lends itself to nurture. In this case, the Gita is speaking about, both things, malnurture and natural nurture. And if you associate with the Rajaguna and Tamaguna, then that's going to lead to impiety. If you associate with Sattva, it's lead to piety and clarity and so forth. And obviously, it comes again and again and again and again and again and again and again. That sadhu sangha is the birth, the janma of bhakti. This is the phrase, sort of the way it's explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Bhakti gives bhakti, as we began, bhakti sandhataya bhaktya. So by association with bhakti, which means association with bhaktas, what does Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur say? Where does bhakti come from? He gives a long argument. It doesn't come from here, it can't come from here, it can't come from there. And in an effort to explain bhakti as a tattva, it's independent. And ultimately he concludes bhakti comes from bhakti. He says that bhakti manifests in the heart of Madhyam bhaktas, who are characterized by discrimination in terms of how they interact with the public. And with the general public, they interact by way of sharing bhakti with them, teaching them. And so bhakti comes from their hearts to others. So you could say, well, so bhakti comes from devotees, from sadhusanga, but sadhusanga is bhakti. Sadhusanga is one of the limbs of it, so bhakti comes from bhakti. And this is the particular limb that it comes from sadhusanga. So that's a pretty strong and clear case that he makes there. And Rupa Goswami, of course, this comes up in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as well, where he speaking about the different sthai bhavs, and towards the end of that chapter, I believe, he makes the case that there is a hierarchy that when we talked about this the other night, from Dasya to Sakya, from Shanta to Dasya to Sakya to Vatsalya to Madhurya, there are more elements included as we go from Shanta to Da. There's 2 elements in Shanta that are included in Dasya, plus something more, and then whatever there in Shanta, in Dasya is included in Sakya, and then more, and then so forth, up to Madhurya. But as I pointed out the other night, it doesn't mean that the Madhurya Bhaktas have Dasya Rasa, Shanta Rasa, Sakya Rasa, Vatsalya Rasa in them. So gopis sometimes decide to be Sakas and sometimes decide to taste Vatsalya Rasa. It doesn't, the example, and I pointed this out the other night, is that the Rupa Goswami gives to explain this, that there's earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and each of them contains, from starting at the other end, from ether, what the previous one contains and something more. So in ether there's sound, and in air there's sound and touch, and in fire there's sound, touch, and sight, and in water there's sound, touch, sight, and taste, and in earth there's sound, touch, taste, sight, and smell. So in Madhurya Rasa, there are all these ingredients, but having earth is not having water. Having water is not having fire. Having air is not having, and so forth. The other element, sound, or any of the other. Each is unique in itself. Each is different, that they have more complex, they have more components. So therefore the same holds true. I've explained that some cowherd boys of Krishna have a desire, they have an attraction to the Madhurya Rasa, which is compatible with Sakya Rasa. So when a devotee of a particular rasa has an attraction to another rasa that is compatible, then that other rasa acts like a sanchari bhav and augments the bhava, for this instance of the cowherd boys. So there's a mixture in that sense, mishra, of Madhurya and Sakya, but it's not that the cowherd boys are engaged in the Priyanaras who have this attraction, engaged in Madhurya Rasa, like the gopis. They become sympathetic towards it. They may have some empathy for Krishna and Radha in their romantic plight, and so forth and so on. And similarly for the gopis can be attracted to Sakya Rasa as compatible, and it will act in a certain way to influence their Madhurya Rasa. So each one is complete unto itself. I say this because sometimes people say, well, probably the Madhurya Rasa, but gopis sometimes they want to taste Sakya Rasa, and Sakya Rasa is inside of Madhurya Rasa. That's not the proper understanding. But as I'm explaining it, that is how Goswami has explained it. So, anyway, I'm not sure how I got there, but inside of the jiva, there's no rasa, period. But by sadhusanga, it becomes possible. Are you making a point, or?
No, I'd like to ask a question.
Okay, just one second. So by sadhusanga, it becomes, we have that opportunity. What we associate with. So we become like. If we associate with sadhus of dasya rasa, then that will come within us. Rupa Goswami said, this is what I was explaining, there's a hierarchy within the rasas, as I'm explaining, like earth, water, fire, air, ether. And Madhurya rasa is most complete in that sense. But then he says, but the question may arise, well, okay, fine, then everybody should choose that one. But they don't. Why don't they choose that one? And then he answers this, because choices are made by association. In other words, by vasanas, by samskaras, by impressions that result from association. Association is not without effect. That's why we should be careful who we associate with. So if we associate with sadhus, and as time goes on, of course, our association will be more important to cultivate a particular mood and so forth. So at any rate, as we can associate with Prabhupada, for example, his disciples, and not know anything about these things. Doesn't mean you're not being influenced by it. He may be teaching you're not the body, but you're also getting a samskar for whatever kind of bhakti he's carrying. It's behind his movements that's really animating him, moving him, or another sadhu, and so forth. Another sadhu may explain it, I'm about this, another may not, but still the influence is there. Prabhupada was a little tight-lipped about it, and it's pretty understandable. I mean, given the time and the circumstance and the level of understanding of his students, he didn't tell everything at once, and you wouldn't either. You get a new bhakti here, you're going to sit down and say, you're actually the handmaiden of Radha, about 14 years old, you wear a blue sari and this, and very important that you understand this. You might, you might lose it. So preaching is an art. So at any rate, as I say, Rupa Goswami explains the reason that everybody doesn't choose Madhurya Rasa, because everybody's not influenced in the same way. Everybody doesn't have the same samskars. And samskars, there's a scholar, Haberman, who did a translation of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and he does a footnote to this, and he explains samskars as material samskars. It's a total misunderstanding of the verse. Obviously, material samskars are not even part of the solution, they are the problem. Our material tendencies that come from associating with the gunas are the problem. They are what needs to be cleansed out of the chitta, that have become shuddha, that bhava might manifest there. So it's never going to be determined by our material samskars. So what kind of samskar? Well, bhakti samskars. And of course, in the commentary, Thakur makes the point clear. We develop a certain taste because of, in this life, because of association with the taste in the previous life. He gives an example of fruits. I think it was taste, sweet, bitter, pungent. So a kid when a kid's born has a tendency for likes bitter, no one likes sweets. So the karmic explanation, of course, is, well, because of the previous life's association, he developed that tendency is coming. And so he says it is with bhakti that because of associating with the devotee in dasya rasa, etc., in the previous life, that rasa and that rasa alone will appear in this life. Depending, I could say, how strong that influence is in comparison to other maybe competing influence of other sadhus. And so, but at some point it's going to crystallize, and it's all a result of sadhu sangha. So now, if I'm 22nd generation Nityananda Vamsa, and if you don't associate with me, you cannot get what Nityananda was about. And I've got the, by my association, you get the swarupa. I've got it right here, actually, right here. It's in my meditation here. I can just close my eyes, and Nityananda Prabhu will tell me, you are such and such. This is your gopi form, or gopa form. But first you got to drink my urine if you want it. I go, what? Bhakti Vinod, it was this is kind of like a selling of swarups, if you will. And so he didn't, was one of the things that concerned him, apparently, with regard to the way in which Gaudiya Vaishnava was being misrepresented. Now, it's not entirely being misrepresented there, as I labor to explain. We get the bhava by association. But it has to be the right kind of association. There's talk of Siddha Pranali. Pranali means a line of siddhas. That's good as long as they're siddhas. Just a line is not very good. You can call it a line of siddhas, but they have to be siddhas. So otherwise it's just a line. and so he objected to this, and he basically said that love of God is in your heart, chant, and it will come out. And he emphasized Harinam. And by Harinam, externally chanting, in due course, the mind will become arrested, the heart will become cleansed by the chanting. As the heart becomes cleansed, the mind can concentrate, and then it can chant, and it can be still, and go within, and relish, and find, through meditation, all that is within the name. If we chant the name in our minds, fleeting here, that we're obviously not able to take advantage of the name entirely. We're chanting, it's having an effect. It's having an effect that's cleansing the heart, that in due course, when the heart's cleansed, proportionately, the mind will be able to pay attention. That's what meditation is. Focus, become fixed on Krishna's Nam, Krishna Nam. That's non-different from Krishna. And so everything will be found there. His rupa is there, his guna is there, his lila is there. And so the meditation becomes progressive from, for example, japa is a form of smaranam. So there's nam smaranam, guna smaranam, rupa smaranam, lila smaranam, and it all will arise in the context of chanting because the guna, the rupa, the lila are all in the nam, are all in the name. Nowadays, it's common for people to say, hey, you've been chanting, don't you think you ought to start doing Raganuga Bhakti now? Start adding in this meditation and think about what you might, be. And then you got to start cultivating that mentally, and so you've got to meditate on your swarup and so on and so forth. This is another nuance, nuance of really misunderstanding that has unfortunate implications, ramifications. And the idea of Bhakti Siddhanta and Bhakti Vinod, which seems different than some of the lineages, not all of them are like this, but some of them that advocate Lila Smarnam and get your Swarup now from the Guru and so forth and so on, which is something that could be done. It's not the only way in which this you will realize the attain Prema Bhakti. Nam is the way of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's perfect and complete. You can't argue against that. You try to argue against that, you make a fool out of yourself. The name Nam is perfect, and Nam will bring about internal life. And that's what meditation is about. One is in a suitable position to meditate. It will happen naturally, spontaneously. It's not a Bhakti Siddhanta was against kind of a forced idea of that. Kind of a mental. Now, yeah, we should try to remember Krishna's pastimes, think about them, meditate on the form of Krishna. We're not objecting to that and so forth, but it's just the fact is that there are stages of progress, and chanting will bring us to the different stages, and in some stages the capacity to meditate and do internal bhakti is becomes possible, and in other stages it doesn't. In Nishta Bhajana Kriya, it's not really possible. So this is very like down to earth, and it was a strong emphasis of Bhakti Vinod and Bhakti Siddhanta, more so even by Bhakti Siddhanta, who was Bhakti Vinod was like in like a needle, and Bhakti Siddhanta under his order was out like a plow, so to speak. But then again, relative to this issue, the Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti Vinod Thakur said, hey, chant and the name will reveal. It doesn't mean that you won't meditate, you won't follow an eternal associate of Braj. All those things are there, but in due course, there would be appropriate time to, you'll be qualified to incorporate all the constitutes Raganuga Bhakti in your life. Therefore, Jiva Goswami has given the nice term, Ajata Ruchi, Raganuga Bhakti. He says, one doesn't really have Ruchi, which is his word that he uses in the Sandarbhas for Lobha, word of Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But you have attraction for the ideal, having had that association, the ideal of Vrindavan Bhakti, and so forth. Then you grow that in the culture of Vaidhi Bhakti, the angas of Vaidhi Bhakti, hearing, chanting. And according to your eligibility, then you employ or engage in the different aspects of Raganuga Bhakti, like Lila Smaranam from the perspective of one's Swarup and so on and so forth. So, I mean, you can be told you're such and such and you should do like this and so on. We wish them the best, but it wasn't exactly what, and some people seem to do well with that. Not a lot, but not a lot do well with anything, it takes time. So, Bhakti Vinod is a good example. We have to follow his example. But he made this kind of, he preached in this way. And when you want to distance yourself from a problem by a particular preaching strategy, it may turn out that in due course you've also created another problem. But if you have a parampara, you haven't, because it will be corrected and so forth. And so, like I said before, the crack in the sidewalk could become the Grand Canyon if you're not careful. And now I've heard teachers say, inside the jiva there's a form, and he has legs and arms, and he's a gopa or a gopi or whatnot. This is a problematic idea from a number of perspectives. It would mean that the jiva is constituted to some extent of the Swarup Shakti, which is not taught. They're independent, different Shaktis, because Bhakti is constituted of the Swarup Shakti. It would mean that the jiva has a personality independent of, well, it would mean that there's Bhakti in the jiva, same idea, problem, and it would mean also that there was partiality on God's part, because Samadasya Bhaktas, some are Shanta Bhaktas. What about the Sayuja Vadis? Those who want Sayuja, where's their personality? That's another thing, we'll go into that a little bit, but the idea is that what's the meaning of the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? If I'm giving you a gift that you already have, then I'm giving it to everybody, but other people have something else already, then how do they get the gift? Right? If you want to say in general, if you want to say the gift is Manjari Bhava, well, not everybody has it inherent. There are the Vaikuntha Bhaktas. If you want to say it's Braj Bhakti, be more general. Still, not everybody has that. That's definitely the gift. You can't deny that. If you want to say, well, it's not only, Manjari Bhava, there could be Sakiras people, we see them in the lineage. And, okay, fine, good. But that's the gift. Braj Bhakti. That's what Chaitanya Charitamrita is about. Krishna is saying, I'm bored with this Bhakti Bhakti. It's not doing anything for me. So I'd like to bestow Braj Bhakti on the world. That's what makes me tick. That's what turns me on. That's when Mother Yasoda chastises me, that's like nectar to my ears compared to the Vedas. Makes Vedas sound like noise. The recitation of the Vedas sound like noise comparatively. So this is very extraordinary, and obviously the gates to Mahavaikuntha are being opened. It's a great dispensation, a great gift. But what is the value of the gift if you already got it? You're inherently a Vaikuntha Bhakta. Shantarasa. It's not for everybody. So that's a problem. And then, if there's, as I say, if the souls have different inherent differences that determine their spirituality in their constitution, that would also play out in terms of their karmic life, their choices. And so that's one of the arguments against the questions as to the partiality of God, in a sense. They're all equal, so there's no partiality there. If they're all different, well, wait a minute, Of course, I say, well, God didn't make it; they just are different, each one of them. But still, then there's a problem, right? Certain people, because they're different. And you have that in Madhva Sampradaya. You have tamasic souls, rajasic souls, and only the sattvic jivas can get mukti. And he maintains that there's something different about each jiva that's not the doctrine of Baladev Vijayabhushan, who came from Madhvas to the Gaudias in Vedanta Sutra, where he could have said that. He doesn't say that. And the Paramatma is the source, if you will, of the Jiva Tattva, and he's characterized by
neutrality,
impartiality, fairness, right? Which is what most people would think God should be like. The fact that he's impartial, he's partial to his devotees, then that's another thing. That's an ornament. He's controlled by bhakti. What can be done? That's his nature. Wow, that's nice to know. So we come from the Paramatma. He's impartial. They're all different. They're individuals. So this is an important point also, because people say, well, if the jiva doesn't have its own distinct individual personality, that's impersonalism. No, you don't understand Gaudiya Vedanta in terms of jiva tattva at all. What we're saying about the jiva tattva is entirely different and opposed to what the Vedanta says about the jiva, which is there is no jiva. First of all, there is no jiva. That's an illusion. Neither is the jiva is one with Brahman, which is all there is. And neither is Brahman have the other qualities of the real jiva as presented by Jiva Swami and our other acharyas. So we're not saying it has nothing to do with impersonalism. It's saying the jiva is this like it's not like matter, unconscious, unknowing. It doesn't know everything. It knows things by way of sattva guna in this world. It doesn't know everything. You take the sattva guna, remove the gunas, the jiva doesn't know everything. It's a power to know. It's the substratum of knowing and knowledge, without which you can't have any knowing. And then it's light, it's luminosity. As I said, it's luminous, but it sheds light on other things. It does that by way of its reflecting on the chitta with the subtle body, and that becomes in sattva, and then there's a kind of knowing, that intelligibility. Things become knowable to the Atma. And same holds on the other side from the spiritual world, knowing Krishna. It has a capacity to know. It has will. Will means independent, because I could have two units of will and offer them the same thing, and there's no law that one will choose, they both choose the same thing. Will is free, will is independent. Now, we're not units of entirely free will. We're like a farmer who has the free will to sow the seeds, but he doesn't have the power to make it rain. He's dependent upon that. So it said, nothing moves without a blade of grass means, well, if God doesn't sanction it, it's not going to happen. He may not sanction everything that you will, but it's not that he wants everything to happen and he's doing it, but he might not get in the way of it. So there is a kind of a determinism and a free will in a compatibilist situation where they're compatible with one another. We're a unit of will, but in order for us to realize our will or our desire, we depend on other factors. And he explains this as well. And the overarching factor, of course, is Krishna, as God. So, so the jiva is very special. Each one is individual, unit of will, and therefore, if you get influenced by Madhurya Rasa and of Gaudiya Sampradaya, then you become a handmaiden of Radha, and you'll be different from every other handmaiden. So you'll have the same bhava, but within that there will be variety also. Like I said, they're all the cowherd boys, the gopis, they have desires. They're all within what's called the Swarup Shakti, which is all entirely focused on pleasing Krishna. So all of their independent desires are arising out of a personality that's derived from one desire to please Bhagavan only. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Vichate. Right? Using the senses to serve the senses of Krishna. That's praying. And so, I hear this kind of thing. Yeah, sounds like you're saying that the jiva is not a person. Well, look up in the dictionary. What's a person? What's a personality? Look up the word. What is a personality? That by which, qualities, desires, one is distinguished from another, something like that. So as I've often said, it requires an environment. What's the environment of the jiva? Well, the Tatastha Shakti has two possible environments. He could exist in either one, the material environment or the spiritual environment. And so where's the personality going to come from? If it's based on choices, if there's nothing to choose, it's already there. So some jivas like peanut butter and some like jelly, and that's how it is. No, obviously the whole material personality is based on samskars, influence, karma, guna, sangha, sadasad, yoni. So as you associate, so you become. Right? So the whole material personality is obviously arising, in one sense, entirely out of the environment, but in another sense, out of the jiva, because the jiva has the capacity to apprehend, to experience, to be an agent of action, make some choices and so forth. So that's very important. It's hardly talking about some like empty thing. Matter's empty, flat. The jiva is alive, it has will, it has it's eternal, and so forth. So without that, matter's nothing. But in relation to matter, then it expresses itself. So in relation to bhakti, the influence of bhakti, then it has a new environment to express itself in. And of course, that's a spiritual environment. It is Satchidananda Anu, and now it's in touch with the entirety of Satchidananda and the Swarup Shakti. And so it develops its, you can say, its personality, because now it is all that it can be in that environment. And you can say, well, as I had before, the jiva can only be understood fully in terms of its potential. So you can say, yes, it's a person, it's an eternal servant of Krishna, has a swarup and everything, because that's its potential. Of course, it has to act on its potential. If it decides to go to Brahma Sayuja, well, then you see what it is without the environment. And what do we call that? Spiritual suicide. So what happened to the person in Brahma Sayuja that was inherited in the jiva? So you see, this is important. People don't even understand Mayavad philosophy, and they're talking about rasa. They haven't even understood Mayavad philosophy, which is like day 101. We're not that, this is why. And they call it impersonalism, and you're talking about jiva tattva and all that prem bhakti constitutes. And they're labeling it in Mayavad. And then they want to say that, that they're experiencing their swarups. There are some people doing this. I mean, that's so it's like, you realize they're not realizing their swarups. They're like, they're not submitting themselves to teachers and teachings in an ongoing way with their heart, knowing that there's something for them to learn, and it's learned by service and surrender, not just by picking and choosing here and so forth. Therefore, you can learn just by being told do this by a sadhu, sometimes more than by information and so forth, or just approaching the teacher and the teachings with that in mind. This is very important. What happens is you get this mental bhakti, and then in some instances you get a Prabhupada who's not really, Prabhupada. It's like Prabhupada is taken out of the sampradaya practically. There's no real future to him worth listening to, unless you have to, and if the speaker did it right, of course, he mentioned Prabhupada's name this many times. If he didn't, they're counting. And then there's no past in that, well, Rupa Goswami may have said Jiva Goswami, but Prabhupada said this. It's like, wait a minute, my gurus have said this. This is the whole, the beauty of the Guru Parampara. By having a real Guru in the Parampara, like it's a contemporary person today, you have also Prabhupada, you have Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami. You just got the key to go in and study their books and so on and so forth and so on. There's something to be said, some precedent to the present Acharya, and Prabhupada made a statement like, don't step over, or something like that. Learn through him, that's true, but that's distorted to say, therefore you can't read Rupa Goswami's books, or if you find something in Prabhupada's books that contradicts Rupa Goswami's books, then obviously Rupa Goswami didn't fully get it, and Prabhupada was the new installment, fully got it. Well, if he fully got it on some point that you're finding the contradiction, you have to demonstrate that in the way that Rupa Goswami demonstrated his particular point. You can't just say, my Guru said it like this. And so there may be instances where the Guru said it and it's different from Rupa Goswami or Jiva Goswami for reasons other than it being the new insight. Maybe, as I said, as a preaching strategy that Bhaktivinoda Thakur invoked. And over time, you may have repeated it, and it may not have been an issue, it may have been useful, but in time, its usefulness, as all preaching strategies are, has reached its limit. And you know, people don't like the idea sometimes of preaching strategies, but as we said, there's just like you just take a look; they're everywhere. Jiva Swami was saying in Sandarbha that Sridhar Swami, the famous Sridhar Swami commentator on Bhagavad Mahaprabhu, liked that he had cast a net, right, and he was baiting with all the Mayavad statements in his commentary. He was trying to draw in the Mayavadis, and with his Vaishnava statements, commentaries, he's trying to draw them in with the net of the Mayavad stuff so that they would come and hear the Vaishnava stuff. That's the preaching strategy of Sridhar Swami. So yeah, who's going to complain with that? Jiva Swami with the Svakya, Parakya. I said the other night, 3/4 of the Vedas are a preaching strategy, right? Purvati Mari. Do this and you get an apple here, you know, you get a carrot, you go to heaven. Just to get them involved according to where they're at. So that's preaching. And it's also preaching, understand that when it's taken place and to weigh in on it. When a crack, you know, is useful, but when it starts turning into a Grand Canyon, it's like leaving you with a long leap now to get, you know, so you get to the other side, and there's a devastating valley in between that you could be leading people to. Follow me, and down we go. And then you become opposed to the actual teaching. You start calling Jiva Tattva, as explained by Jiva Goswami, Mayavad philosophy. I mean, where are you going to get with that? You have no ear to hear it because you already know everything because your Prabhupada is you don't have anything to learn from anybody because Prabhupada gave you everything. And I made my claim like that, and I'm doing it for a few years now, and I'm going to keep it up. You know, we're special. You know, you are for sure. We're a special piece of work. That's not good. Not good. So it's important for us to understand. That's why it's, you know, we emphasize some of these points and make the point and seek to bring dignity to our lineage that it warrants, and understand it in context and what the contributions are. I mean, you know, Prabhupada's contribution was immense and unique and extraordinary, and at the same time, you know, by his grace, he left some things to be done. Like I said, I consider myself like a pencil sharpener. Prabhupada wrote it down. Some places the pen needed a little sharpening, pencil. That's all. That's his kindness. That's something for us to do. And sometimes a little pencil sharpening can be pretty important. Just one section will change anything, right? Don't change anything. I mean, what does that mean? It applies to himself. Don't change anything, Prabhupada. Yes, I know. I did that for a reason. You can change it back now. I mean, he taught us, for example, that his credibility derived from repeating it as it is. And he also told us sometimes that, you know, by hook or by crook, you sell the book, and mother tells the child, you know, close your eyes, I'll give you some candy, and then puts the medicine in the mouth. I mean, that's our lineage. And so in places where he's doing that, you might want to point out that was actually a trick. You know, he had a purpose in mind there. And how can we say? Because this is what Rupa Goswami says here. And so let's bring it together now and understand it in a more mature way. And it enhances our appreciation for Prabhupada. Otherwise, you don't do that, you start presenting Prabhupada with such a misunderstanding that other people who don't have the misunderstanding start thinking, because he didn't know the philosophy here or something. That doesn't bring dignity. So there's only a couple points like that, like you didn't fall from Vaikuntha, and Bhakti's not inherent in the Jiva, which are related. Bhakti's inherited in the jiva, it must have been in Vaikuntha, I guess. Right? Somehow you got here. And I was reading Brihad Bhagavatamrita, and just as a side, Sanatana Swami was saying that certain associates of Narayan are Nityasiddhas, and some like Jai Vijay are Sadhanasiddhas.
Oh.
One's going there, one never returns. It only applies, you know.
Oh.
They say, they misunderstand the verse. So. Good one, huh?
We need Jack over here starting now.
So you had a comment? Oh, what time is it?
8:23.
It's time for more bhakti. Huh? Bhakti on time when we start. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. Shri Gauri Vaishnava Guru Parampara ki jai. Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gadhev Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gaura Ramananda ki jai. Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Gaur Premanand.